Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2022 release VHS 99. It's a found footage film, it's a Shudder original, and it's coming to Shudder on Thursday, October 20th. This is one that a lot of found footage fans have really been looking forward to, and I can say you can get excited about it. If you like found footage, I think you're really going to find a lot to enjoy in this. Especially if you liked 94, I think that as a whole, this one is better than 94, but there are, individual segments done by different people that I think are better in this one, and there's one in particular that is better than all the ones in this one from 94. That was the Timo Jajahanto one, which blew my mind for the most part. But this is obviously a no spoiler review because I'm putting it out before it's available and because it's a new film. So I'll give you a little synopsis, basically like one sentence that doesn't give away too much for each of the segments. And I'm going to rate each segment individually and then give you an overall rating at the very end. So let's jump into it. The first thing that I need to say is that there's always something that kind of like brings everything together and signifies like the breaks in the stories. For this, it's like this weird stop motion, like someone playing with army men trying to make their own film type thing. Interesting-ish idea, but the way it plays out, it doesn't really feel like it matters to any of the stories. It doesn't like tie things together like a lot of the VHSs have done, so it just feels weird. It feels out of place. It does the job of signifying when there are breaks from story to story, but could have done without it, should have done without it, or come up with a different idea. It just gets like kind of drawn out when it's being done too. It's just kind of odd. I didn't understand that choice. Let's get into the first story though. The first story is called Shredding. This one's written and directed by Maggie Levin, who also did Miss 2059 and Sticky, which I think that one's going to be coming out. Definitely has a 90s youth feel to it with how it starts, and it has like a very upbeat, fun vibe to it, and it does maintain that throughout the film, so I like that aspect of it. The acting is actually pretty good. The character relationships do feel believable. I think that's actually something for the most part that you can apply to almost all I think actually all of the shorts within this, is characters are pretty well done, well acted, and like their interactions seem real. Their relationships seem very real. They have a lot of mixing in of random other things in this particular story, which gets pretty annoying with how often it is. It also makes it feel kind of like over-the-top frantic. And what I'm talking about is, this is found footage, so like someone was recording this stuff, and there are like all these moments of like, they didn't fully record over what was on there before, and there's just like these inserted random things, which I think really detract from the film. I think they really detract from the story. I know they were in there to get the feeling of it being like actual found footage, and this was a tape that someone had other stuff taped on, and they, it's very amateurish. So like I get the point, but they do it way too much in my opinion. You can do it a lot more sparingly and get the point across. With how much it's in there, it's distracting. And like I said, it makes it feel like a little too frantic in my opinion. The camera work is actually pretty good for a found footage film. Honestly, all of these stories, they do a pretty good job of, when they're able to, when the situation allows it, keeping the camera relatively stable. It's all handheld, but the camera people do a good job of not making it too shaky, so that's good. You never get a really good look at what you're most interested in this one because of the lighting and the camera work. So that's kind of a bummer with this story, because there are certain things you're like, oh, this is kind of cool. Can't really see it all that well. There is a moment where you do see some good like makeup effects that were pretty cool, close up and pretty well lit. And my question with this one in particular was, with things that go down in this, where did the footage come from? Like, where did someone obtain this footage? And I think this story kind of steps outside of that realm. I think a few of the stories kind of step outside of that realm of, okay, so where did this footage end up being found? You know what I mean? So, because it is found footage, someone has to find it. It has to be believable that someone can find it. And I realized that I didn't give you the quick synopsis for this one, so I'll just give it to you really quick. It's basically about a bunch of youths who just are making videos, and they're messing around, and they know of this kind of urban legend about this band that had been trampled to death by their own fans. So they go to that location. There you go. It's horror. You can, make assumptions about things that end up happening. So this one, Shredding, overall, out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I'm giving it 2 stars. Wasn't big on it. It's definitely the least impressive of all of the stories in this. So I'm glad that it started with this. It's not terrible, but it's not that great. It serves best being the first one because it whets your palate a little bit for what's to come. The next one is Suicide Bid. Before I get in, well, I'll tell you who directed it and wrote it, and then I'll tell you the quick synopsis. Written and directed by Johannes Roberts, who also did 47 Meters Down, which I think is actually a pretty good shark flick. Resident Evil, Welcome to Raccoon City. The Strangers Prey at Night, which I think is an underrated sequel. The Other Side of the Door, Storage 24, Forest of the Damned, Dark Hunters, and Hellbreeders, just to name some. Plenty of work. So, Suicide Bid basically is about a girl who wants to do a bid for a sorority. And they call it a suicide bid because she's only doing one. Like, she's putting all her eggs in one basket. So there's a hazing that ends up being involved with going to a cemetery. And that's all I'm going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you where it ends up going, but something else I say may hint at what's going on here a little bit later in this review. The way the story is laid out helps you understand what's basically at stake for the main character, and kind of as it progresses, it makes you start to kind of think about what things could go wrong in this story. And obviously that's what we're looking for because that's the horror element of it. I think they do take it into some solid places, and I was pretty pleased with this one. The camera work also, again, pretty stable. Probably the most stable of all of them, and pretty smooth, especially for a found footage film. So I was very happy with that, being someone who has, sometimes it's a little too much for me, all the motion. There's some story downtime that ends up coming into this, and it's actually used really well. They fill that space with the main character letting you know more about them. Like, it's time that really needs to be taken downtime-wise for the overall story, but they don't waste it. They use it to kind of endear you more to the character. You can see more of the character's personality. You can understand their motivations, stuff like that. So, well done in that sense. It speaks to some good writing. They do a good job of gradually making things worse. That's another thing. It's not just like, things are good, and then boom, everything goes crazy. They kind of gradually start making things worse within the film, which I think is a nice kind of like building to the very end where, things obviously get a lot crazier. The scares are pretty good, and it's claustrophobic. So take from that what you will. If you have a problem watching things that make you feel claustrophobic, maybe this isn't the one for you. You might want to fast forward through that, but they did a good job of making you feel claustrophobic, which I think enhances the story. So overall, I gave this one 3 stars. Solid. Then we go to Ozzy's Dungeon, and this was one of the 2 best in this series. This one's directed by Flying Lotus, who also did the film Kuso, which I have not seen, but I think may still be on Shudder. It's also written by Flying Lotus and Zoe Cooper. Now, this one is kind of ridiculous, fun, over the top. Goes in all sorts of places, all sorts of directions at times. But it's basically about a old school game show is how it starts out. Think about something kind of like Double Dare meets Legends of the Hidden Temple, if you're familiar with those, which both shows that I watched as a kid. So there's a lot of nostalgia factor that gets thrown into this film. But basically it's about that type of show. But it's a much less safe show. And based off of that, you're going to have no idea where this story goes. And I had no idea where this story went. So it's a pretty wild ride, to be honest. The intro portion is pretty ridiculous, fun, and funny, and they do maintain that. There is a humor throughout this, but there's also a lot of other things going on within it, so it keeps it light and fun and funny, but there's a little bit of ridiculousness. There's some actual horror to it. It's a little disturbing at times. It's it kind of hits so many things, and that's one of the things I like about it. There are plenty of plays at nostalgia, like I said, which I personally love because this was a time period I remember growing up during. It becomes hard to see where the horror will come into play, but it does, and it works. Just stay with it, and know that the horror's coming. You also are not going to see where this is going. You're really not going to see where this is going. No one's going to see where this is going. There's a much deeper meaning to this one, and if you really think about what that deeper meaning is, it really does work. This whole thing really is a metaphor for something very, I was going to say important, something very terrible within our society that needs to be dealt with, obviously, but this does a really good job being a metaphor for what that is. Don't want to say too much because I would like people to be able to figure it out on their own, but I really dig the metaphor. I dig how it was pulled off. I think it's kind of genius how that was done. So overall, rating on this one, 3.5. A very solid 3.5 on this one. The next one was called The Gawkers. Now, this one was directed by Tyler MacIntyre, who also did Patchwork and Tragedy Girls, 2 films I've actually reviewed on my channel and enjoyed both of. This one's actually, it's also written by MacIntyre as well as Chris Lee Hill, who also helped in writing Patchwork, Tragedy Girls, and did Blowing Up Right Now, which I haven't seen that last one. So this one's just basically about a bunch of youths who are filming things, and they see a girl who moved into town, and they're very interested in her in a very youth way, a male youth way, and them kind of invading her privacy to a degree. And I'm just going to stop there because it becomes horror. Don't want to give too much away. Just watch it. The beginning has a real similar feel to the Shredding one. It's got that kind of like youths doing crazy stuff, being, kids being kids type thing, being, ridiculous, teasing each other, stuff like that. So it has a very similar feel, but it does diverge a lot from that story. The juvenile antics in this actually do get a little bit old. I feel like they went on a little bit too long with the juvenile antics because they're, I don't think they're all that funny. I understand why they're in there because they kind of establish who these characters are, and that's important, so they need to be in there for sure. I just think they could have cut back a little bit of what it is. You get a bit of an inkling where this film's actually headed, but you're probably not going to guess exactly what lore they end up mining for this one. So kudos for doing something new. I mean, it's not like new story-wise, like they didn't come up with their own like lore for this thing. They used something very old, but it's something that doesn't get used like ever, really. You'll be familiar with it, but it doesn't really get used ever. So kudos for resurrecting something, making use of it in this type of setting. When things get crazy, it's pretty effectively shot. It's not too crazy. It's not too much like camera motion where you can't see what's going on. They do a good job of making sure that you're seeing what you need to see. So that speaks to some good cinematography and directing. Overall, I'm giving this one 3 stars. Decent, didn't love it, 3 stars. And the final one of the other ones that was the best. So Ozzy's Dungeon was one of the best. This one, also one of the best. This one is called To Hell and Back, written and directed by Vanessa and Joseph Winter, who also did Deadstream, which I just put out a review for. So going into it, I was assuming this will be kind of like found footage horror comedy. It is. It definitely has a humor to it. It's light. It's fun. And much like Deadstream, I did enjoy it. They have a real knack for making this type of film, and they can get me to watch found footage. I'm not big on found footage, but these individuals can get me to watch found footage. I'm down with it. So basically the story is the teaser for it, and this doesn't really like give much away because it's immediate that happens. It is about a satanic ritual that goes wrong, and it's comedic. That's all I'm going to say. Sit back, buckle up, enjoy the ride. It's immediately light and a bit humorous, as you would assume from what I already just said. They actually don't waste much time at all getting into the actual intrigue of it, and it does end up becoming very adventurous. I love the adventurous nature of it, and wherever they found their shooting location, very awesome for what they're doing with this story. Very good use of shooting location. You'll see what I mean. This is such a large-scale idea. It could have crashed and burned horribly, but they were very clever with how they shot it and how they constructed things, how they used CGI, how they used practical effects. Pretty impressed with how they were able to pull that off, because if you think about the premise here, it's a big concept, especially the adventurous aspect of it, like where the setting is supposed to be. It's a huge concept, but I think they pulled it off pretty well. So I was pretty impressed with that. The main characters do a good job delivering lighthearted humor. Joseph Winter? Sorry. Joseph Winter was, who is also in Deadstream. He was the main character in Deadstream, if you've seen it at this point. I thought he did a good job there. He was very Ryan Reynolds type with his line delivery. I think he's less so in this, but still does a really good job. It's interesting because I figured that was like just his style, but it seems that he has kind of different styles. So that's awesome. It shows range, obviously. That's cool. But they keep it very nice and lighthearted, and the relationship between the two main characters I really dig, and you probably will too. It keeps it fun. There are fun practical effects and gore in this one too. I really enjoy the practical effects and gore, how they're used. They're not the most impressive looking things, but they use them kind of quickly, so you don't have too much time to like really, really focus on them, which is to the credit of what they knew their limitations were, basically. So I'm giving this one another 3.5 stars, much like I gave Ozzy's Dungeon. So obviously Ozzy's Dungeon and To Hell and Back, 3.5 stars. Those are quite good. Overall, for VHS 99, it's a very solid 3-star rating. When you have 5 shorts of varying, degrees of what I liked or didn't like, and then you put all that together to have like an overall rating, getting a 3 out of it, pretty good. So honestly, I think overall I enjoyed this more than 94, and I'm very interested to see what the next one is. Because I think they already greenlit it. It's like VHS 85, I think. I might be wrong on the year, but it's in the 80s. I know that much. So I'm pretty interested in that one based off what this one was like. So I think it actually slightly improved. So I'm down with it. Would love to hear other people's opinions once you have seen it. Go ahead and put some comments down there. Tell me if you liked it, didn't like it in between, and which individual ones you liked the most, which individual ones you didn't like all that much, and why. Just like a short sentence or two. The other thing is you can talk spoilers. Go ahead, spoilers in the comments. That's totally fine. So just know there may be spoilers in the comments, people. Do me a quick favor, though. Hit subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I greatly appreciate it if you do. It keeps me motivated. It is literally the best way to repay me if you like any video I've ever done, including this one. Also hit the notification bell button, because then you'll know when I'm putting up new videos, which I'm putting in a lot of work, putting out at least 4 a week, sometimes more. So help me out here. I appreciate that. But anyway, regardless, thank you for taking your time to watch this video, and until next time, keep it brutal.